For this video, we're going to be turning the Jetson Orin Nano Super into a micro PC. A micro PC. I can't even do it with a straight face. I had to, but excuse me. For today's video, we are going to basically turn the Jetson Orin Nano into a little mini PC, which is obviously a little PC, gaming PC style case. However, aside from just kind of doing a quick overview time lapse of actually putting this together, following this, we are going to go ahead and actually install Box64 as well as Wine64, which will allow us to actually run Windows EXE applications on the Jetson Orin Nano. Now, this is definitely more of an experimental kind of demo video than a full-on in-depth tutorial. However, the steps that we will take to actually go ahead and get some EXEs running on this mini computer are fully reproducible by anyone who has one of these. So I figure it will be a good bit of fun, and we'll just we'll get into it. And you might be wondering, as a side note, how the heck did you come up with such a beautiful design? And I find inspiration anywhere, I suppose you could say. All right, let's get into it. All right, I'm really pushing the limits of this camera right here, but I want to just quickly show how to actually put a power switch onto this. So as you probably know, if you're watching this video, normally the Jetson, if you want to actually power it on, you just put the power adapter in the back there and it will turn on. If you want to put a power switch in it, you have to disable the auto power on, which is basically what allows that to actually work. So to do that, you're going to need a small jumper, which is just kind of a little piece of plastic that makes a connection between two little pins like what you see here. However, for this, we are not actually going to be focusing on these pins. We're going to be focusing on the row of pins that is actually basically under the actual Jetson compute module itself. So essentially, they do say this, and if you actually flip the Jetson over, you can actually see that there's some labeling as well, which obviously I can't do because that is just the back of the computer. So for what we're going to do right here, we're going to count from top, which is essentially the top of the Jetson, to bottom. And for this purpose, we can say bottom is the GPIO pins here. So we have 1, 2, sorry, I really can't see, hold on. So we have 1, 2, and these are where our actual power button is going to go in. And for the switch I'm using, it really doesn't matter which I put here because it's just a cheap little Amazon push button switch. So I can just kind of pop them on just like this. Now, that won't actually do anything because we have not disabled that auto on yet. So from where we go here, we basically go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 says auto on, and then 8 is disable. So 7 auto on and 8 disable. And the jumper goes between 7 and 8, which, if I can kind of snake it right here, is those two pins. So, and we can now see that those two are successfully jumped. So we have our power button on 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 empty, and then 7, 8 are jumped. And this will actually allow this little power button to act as, well, a power button for the Jetson. And I put it on the back because it just, you'll see with the front on, there wouldn't really have been much room for it. There is actually one more thing that I want to make note of before I go back to the time lapse, and that's basically that for these fans, I'm actually going to ignore the blue wire, which is just basically the speed control wire for these. And because I don't have this many connections for 1, 2, 3, 5 volts, and then 1, 2, 3 grounds, I am actually going to cut these wires up and just splice them so that it just ends up having one output terminal, which then will be wired into the actual header here for power and ground, which I will show as well. All right, I have the little homemade kind of 3-to-1 adapter set up, so hopefully when I plug this Arduino into this power bank, I will be able to go ahead and, all right, cool. So we have fans and they are all going to work now off of just one connection, which is kind of what we needed. So I'm happy about that, and I can basically continue now finishing with this build. Quick shout out to Jetson Hacks and the Jetson Hacks website for a fantastic expansion header pinout graphic on the website. So basically the reason I need that is because I need 5 volts for the fan and then ground for the fans as well. These 3 fans in the front, I mean. So based on the graphic on the website, and we can't see, it's probably too difficult to see right now, but there is little markings on the PCB here. So there's a 1 right here and there's a 2 right here. So it basically goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. So I am going to be using 4 for the 5 volt power, which is this one right here, which I did put the green wire on to make sure that I could recognize. The ground wire is going to go on pin 6, which will be the pin next to pin 4, being that it is the one that is actually next to it in its row. I hope that makes some level of sense. And just for consistency, I did make this little tiny toolkit for it, which I put everything in. I like doing this because it just helps me stay organized for these builds, and then I don't have to be picking these tiny screws out of their original cases. So, all right, this is basically ready to go ahead and be plugged in. Fortunately, inside doesn't look too messy with the wires. I was a little concerned that it may end up looking that way, but fortunately it didn't. And we're basically ready to just plug it in and see if I wired everything properly. Alright, so I have turned it on now and it is plugged in, and I'm just doing it this way because of the way it's designed for the power jack to be on the bottom. It kind of has to face this way, meaning the window. So you can see everything is plugged in, and since this is a fresh install, it is just doing chromium again. But I am really quite excited. The only thing I've noticed is that the power switch works, but when I plug the power jack in, the fans on the front turn on. So it seems like the GPIO is still getting power, even though the Jetson's not turning on. So I'll have to just kind of see what's up with that. But I just wanted to quickly show this, as I have to say, I'm excited. And from the front, we can see the fans. And if I wanted to just kind of pop this on, make it look a little more gaming computerish, I suppose. Alright, that does look better, so we'll leave that on. There is like a decent amount of airflow going through here. I can't actually feel it back here, so alright, I've probably rambled on about this too much. Let's get into actually getting this thing to run some EXEs. For what we're going to do now, we're essentially going to first install something called Box64, which basically allows us to run x86 64-bit Linux applications on our ARM processor 64-bit NVIDIA Jetson Orin Nano. So if we scroll down here, we can see that this is really like a fantastically cool repository, and I don't know why, but I love this logo. It's like, I very much appreciate this logo. Following that, I want to quickly mention that there is also something called Box86, and that is essentially to allow you to run 32-bit applications on this system or an ARM system. However, I tried playing with that and I just could not get it working at a level that really was any good, and it seemed to have a lot more setup quirks and things to have to really figure out, like nitty gritty, like troubleshooting sort of things. So for the purpose of what we're going to do here, we really are only going to be able to run 64-bit programs. And as we can see here, Box64 will allow you to run x86 64 Linux programs. But because we want to end up ultimately running EXEs, which are Windows programs, we can see that if we scroll down a little bit more here, where I think I may have scrolled down too far. Hold on, give me a second. There's something, it says wine somewhere. Okay, yes, compiling and installation. We see that there is wine installation for Box64. So we won't go over this right this second, but we are going to install Wine64, and Wine64 will basically allow us to run 64-bit Windows program on our 64-bit ARM Linux device, which is our Jetson Orin Nano Super. So through the functionality of Box64 as well as Wine64, which we are both going to go ahead and actually install right now, we will be able to actually get this working and be able to run EXEs, which is ultimately the goal of kind of this little demonstration. So I quickly did just want to mention that if I do say Box86 at all in the subsequent parts of this video, I meant Box64. So I honestly, I flip them around all the time. It's just something I kind of do. I don't know why. I digress. So we are essentially just going to go ahead and do this. Now, I did go ahead and, of course, put the instructions on my website, but I'm not actually, I don't sell anything on the website. This is like something you could buy, but it's sold out because I open sourced it, so it will never be back in stock here. So I'm not just like trying to get you to my website to be like, buy my stuff. However, if we scroll down to the blog posts, we can see that I have basically just gone ahead and simply put the instructions right here on the website. So you can kind of just scroll down and copy paste them. So we're going to begin by just doing the Box64 installation. And then upon completion of that, we will go ahead and install Wine64. And really, it should be quite streamlined and simple. This isn't going to be an in-depth tutorial as much as just a kind of technical exploration with reproducible steps, I suppose you could say. I am basically just going to go ahead and follow through these at the same time and record it live. First thing to do is, of course, to clone the Box64 GitHub repository and place it into a folder called Box64 and then jump right into that folder. Following that, we are going to make a build directory, and we are going to go into the build directory, which will be a subdirectory of the Box64 directory where we cloned the GitHub. So the next thing we are going to do is set up Box64 specifically for Jetson hardware. And you can see that there are little kind of like italicized like sticky notes or quick notes of what's actually going on here while we do this, just at a very high level. So, and some of this will take a little bit of time, especially this. So this will basically go ahead and build Box64 using 4 of our very beefy CPU cores. And we can see that this will take a little bit of time, and we can kind of just see that there will be some warnings and things like that that show up, and a lot of things like that. We can basically overlook those for what this is doing. So as long as it hits 100, and it will hit 100 and then kind of hang for a little, and then it will return us to our standard shell prompt, which we can then subsequently move on to step 5. We can now see that everything did work because we don't see any errors really right here, and we have been returned to where we were prior to running step 4. So we can just go ahead and move on to installing Box64, which we can just copy paste these commands and enter our user password as it will prompt us for, and that is far quicker to finish than step 4 was. Following that, we are going to enable system integration, which will tell the system to run x86 apps using Box64. and that is quite quick. And the final thing we're going to do is verify the installation by just asking the system to tell us what version of Box64 is installed. And we can see that we do get output here, which is a good thing. And it tells us that Box64 is properly installed. So what we're going to do now is essentially move on to install Wine64, which, as it says right here, allows us to run Windows 64-bit programs on our Linux machine. Now, there is a section for this in the Box64 GitHub. So if we scroll down here, we can actually see the Wine installation README for Box64 and Linux. I have gone through this and unfortunately did run into this issue where basically your device's package manager might try to install those if you ask it to install Wine, which is the incorrect one and will not work with this. So we need a specific package of Wine-AMD64 to be installed manually on ARM-64 devices, which is our little Jetson right here. Now, to do that is a bit more complicated. As you can see down here, there is kind of a lot of stuff that needs to happen. So fortunately, I have just kind of played with this enough that I got some variant of it working, and it is actually quite simple to do. And this is a fresh install of the basic Jetpack 6.1 image that I downloaded a few days ago when I did the full Jetson setup tutorial. So all of these instructions here that we're going to do now are essentially tailored for this specific version of the operating system and should work fine on yours as well if you have also downloaded that same Jetpack version that I have here, which you very likely have if you're watching this video. So we're just going to go ahead and set these variables so that we can actually go ahead and download the specific package we need of Wine, which is the custom one that will allow it to actually work on our system. And remember that you cannot just paste into terminal like you can. Okay, I mean, maybe, never mind, ignore everything I just said. So we're going to just do step 2, and we can see that that has been completed. The next thing we're going to do is just jump into step 3. And again, this is kind of more of just like I'm following along and doing this just to get these installed. This is less of a deep dive and more of a, here's how I got it working, enough to actually experiment and play with it a bit, which is kind of all I wanted, was to be able to run some indie games from itch.io that were 64-bit EXEs for Windows. So following that, we're just going to create system links from step 4. And again, I apologize if the website is kind of, okay, I don't, it's not really designed to do code blocks, things like this, so we're doing our best. All right, so that's done. Next thing we're going to do is install these dependencies, and I found that these were the only dependencies that were not already installed on this Jetpack 6.1 default base image, so I'm just having those installed here. And once that is done, we will initialize Wine. And keep in mind that if you're doing this through an SSH connection to the Jetson, after this step, so I think this step here, but the following step, you need to actually be on the device to do it, unless you have it set up so that you have your, I don't remember the term, is it X server or something? It's basically what I'm trying to say, and I apologize if I'm a little off. I've been up for a little bit of time, but basically, if you're doing this through SSH like I was, when it wants to actually open something on the screen, it couldn't, so it would throw an error and it would not quite work. So I need to actually be on the desktop of my Jetson. There are probably ways around doing that through SSH or something like that, but I can't comment on those right now. So finally, we see we have our Wine Mono installer, and it's saying it can't find a mono package which is needed for .NET applications. I just go ahead and click install, and it does it, and it doesn't seem to cause any issues or have any errors, so I just kind of do that. And then basically once this is done, we can just go ahead and run a Windows program, which we will now need to go to the web and download some EXEs. No, we're not going to do that. I found a game on itch.io that I thought was cool, so I downloaded it. I paid for it. It was $1. And then I got it playing. So basically, we are now essentially all set to actually be able to run a Windows EXE on the Jetson Orin Nano running its Jetpack operating system. So I'm going to load an EXE up, and then we'll basically go ahead and test it out. And you got to give love to the indie devs, especially. So we can see that it's like a little isometric Demolition Derby game, and it's kind of cool. Now, you would think that this would run great on the Jetson right now. However, that's not quite the case. So there are obviously going to be considerations and probably ways to tweak this and get some more things working and types of acceleration and things like that. However, I've not really played with any of that beyond just actually getting this working to be able to run EXEs from Windows that are 64-bit. And that is part of the reason that I chose this game, is because it did have a 64-bit variant as well, which it showed on the itch page. So we can now, I just need to get its name, and then I will copy this. And if you are running a Windows EXE, you can just type Wine64, and then you type the EXE right here, and then it will go ahead and actually open the game. So in a second, we are going to see the game actually open, and we can see. So we're essentially running a 64-bit Windows game on the Jetson Orin Nano right now. And well, if you're still watching, it's exciting to you most likely as well. And we can just see, okay, let's do classic rumble. We'll go easy peasy, and we can just kind of scroll through and see some of the cars. This is quite cool. Let's see. All right, yep, I like it. And like I said, it's kind of laggy. The graphics don't look great. This is not a reflection of the game. This is a reflection of the layers of abstraction and such that are working on the Jetson right now, and the fact that I haven't really tried to optimize this or do anything, which hopefully those more knowledgeable than myself will now undertake to allow me to play BeamNG on this. But basically, I may have encountered an issue. I seem to be having some form of keyboard lag, but we are, oh no, we are basically, not basically, we're playing a 64-bit Windows game right now on the Jetson Orin Nano Super, which I think is really kind of cool. So as I am just being embarrassed by the competition here, I'm probably just going to close out of this, and it seems that the key commands are perhaps a bit delayed, but if I spam click escape, I should ultimately be brought to a menu that will allow me to quit out of the game. Oh, okay. So it's now responding to my, oh, nice. Okay, and now we can just go ahead and quit the game. I don't really know like what other EXEs I can run. Now, I do think that I can type Box64 Notepad. Don't quote me on this. If this doesn't work, I've made a mistake. Okay, was it? Okay, so it was Wine64 Notepad. I apologize for that. But we can see that we have Notepad open right here, which is kind of cool. And you can see that the UI is obviously quite different than what we would expect from this default Jetpack. So just, I mean, kind of cool. And obviously this runs rather well, which is good. But yeah, I mean, this was just kind of a quick way and something I just wanted to demonstrate as part of the video of actually showing the case and such, as I didn't really just want to make a video like building a 3D printed thing and then not doing anything with it. So I figured that people may be interested in this. I know there are a large amount of folks out there who are interested in retro video game emulation and things like that. There was a, I don't know that I'd say now defunct project, but something that I don't know has been updated for a while. I don't remember the name, but it was essentially for the Jetsons to actually be able to run game emulators and things like that, which I know a lot of people are very, very interested in. So this was just kind of a demo of here's something cool I found that I figure other folks with these Jetsons may also be interested in playing with and might have a use case for or be able to do something cool with. So that is really going to just conclude this video. I hope that it was of some benefit. And I have to say, with these 3 fans going on full with no speed control, it is quite loud. I have not checked the temperature differentials between keeping the Jetson in an open air on the table versus having it in the case. Probably hotter in the case, to be honest with you, but, you know, aesthetics are paramount. So, yeah, I should probably go to sleep, and thanks for watching.